So, there's a lot of people sick these days. Have you noticed? We hope that Holly feels better, of course, speedily and soon. You can tell her that. I'm sure she's watching. We're streaming live from Har Hashem. And in the midst of the healing prayers, and Holly, we know that can hear your name. We all hope that you feel better soon and get back really, really soon. Let's talk about the Torah. That's much more comfortable. Let's talk about the Torah. So in the Torah, we're at the very end of the book of Exodus. And this is, in the beginning, it talks about accounting, making sure that everything is taken care of and all of the books are done. And it's really important stuff because there's a lot of gold and silver and kesef and all of these kinds of things. But the part that's really interesting to me, there's something happening in the text. After reporting on all that had been done in creating the Mishkan, now remember the Mishkan is the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is a fancy word for a portable temple. And as they were going through this wilderness on their way to the promised land, they were finding God kind of centered in that Mishkan. And so the Torah says, and Moses saw, Vayar, all the tasks, Kol HaMelacha, and behold, Vehineni, they had done it all, asu, they had done it all, as God had commanded, so they had done, and Moses blessed them. Yivarach. And all of those words are in this one little section at the very, very end of the book of Exodus. Now, for some that are familiar with Hebrew, some of those words might be familiar to you. You might recognize them in a similar kind of a sequence, because if we go all the way back to the beginning of the Torah, in the book of Genesis, we read, and God saw, Vayar, all, Kol, that God had done, again, Asa, and behold, Vehineni, it was good. In Genesis, God looks and sees. In Exodus, Moses looks and sees. And after God evaluates the world, we are informed that God blessed the seventh day, Vayivarech. And after Moses sees the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the portable temple, that it had been built and it was done well, and he did it himself, we hear that Moses blessed the Israelites with Vayivarech. So something's kind of interesting. It's kind of happening here. God's creation of the world provides for us, all of us, a place to live. Great. Israel's construction of the Mishkan, we can't all fit in it. We don't all live inside of it. But it helps us to connect to God. Remember, we also read earlier in Exodus that the people built this Mishkan in order for God to dwell among the people. God didn't need it. The folks did in order to try and create an encounter. They wanted to be centered around something special and meaningful and provocative and beautiful. Both the Mishkan and the world are designed by God and supposed to be really special. But our world, not so perfect. Have you noticed? Not so perfect. There's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of brokenness, and there's a lot of suffering. And we want a world where we're able to be free and enjoy life, and we want that for other people too. To be able to look out and see grandeur and not only how am I going to find my next meal. We know that there is hardship and there is heartache in our world, the world that God created. And maybe, just maybe, that's why God also created the Mishkan. Because if God doesn't need it, and God comes on down and dwells among the people, and the people feel like they need something to connect to circle and to be inspired by, they want that temple. They want that Mishkan. Many people feel like it is really difficult to find a way to connect to the divine, to God, to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, Rabbi, you're talking about God again. God, 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 God. That's what somebody told me. God, 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 God. That was the commentary. I couldn't believe it. And if you think really hard, you can figure out who it was. So, I'm not going to answer the question. The thing is, if God is creating this mikdash, and God creates the world, and they both have purpose, and the world is supposed to be amazing, but it is so broken and hard, well, what's the role of the mikdash? How do we surround it? By the way, it doesn't exist anymore. And once they got to Jerusalem, they built the holy temple. Well, the mikdash wasn't useful. They had a temple, right? The real Beta mikdash. Then it was glorious, and it was amazing, and then it was destroyed. And we were exiled. And then folks said, okay, you Jews can go back home and rebuild it. And they did. A second temple was built. And then that one was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans. And then there's been no temple. Side note, it's kind of interesting why the Reform folks wanted to call congregations and synagogues temples, because they wanted to make an access point that you can find God anywhere, not just on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. On some level, that's really appealing to me. And I think in this context, if we're looking at the creation of the Mishkan and the creation of the world, well, this Mishkan must have something really important to tell us, because I think that people feel like they're in exile. I think that there's folks who feel like life is so hard and God is so far away. We have this estrangement. We're not super connected, and I don't even know where to go. For the ancients, it was the Mishkan. For us, maybe it could be this place. That's why I invest the energy I do here, giving me pneumonia, singing without Holly. That's part of the reason why I think lots of you invest in this place, because we feel distant in so many ways from other people and from our world. In a world that's permeated by selfishness and indifference, where can the God who shelters us with peace be? Now I know, you're in Boulder. I've learned by this point, you can find God anywhere you want. You don't necessarily need us. You've told me that a million times. I get it. I've heard you. But I'm going to suggest that Mishkan is still the answer. And we need to build it. And we need to fill it. And we need to make it beautiful. And we need to make it inspiring. Now, maybe that's not the sanctuary for you. Okay, that works for me. Sanctuary works for me. But then where's going to be the Mishkan that you are going to find grounding, that is going to be comforting and inspiring? It should be beyond your own house, your own rooms. It should be a place where we have an opportunity to connect with other human beings and see them for who they are, truly children of God. You know what I learned recently? I never thought of this before, but it kind of makes sense now. The sockets. You know, first of all, when you read the book of Exodus, after they get out of Egypt and all of that fun stuff is over, you need like an engineering degree to understand the Torah. It took me years to figure out what's going on in this building construction of the tabernacle. Finally, thank God, there was somebody in Torah study that was an engineer, and he really explained it to me. This is really complicated, and they had sockets. The real sockets, and they're connecting the higher parts to the lower parts. It was really interesting, and they're called Adanim. Adanim sounds interesting, maybe even familiar. Same letters for Adonai. Now, Adonai isn't God's name. Adonai is the code word we use because we don't know how to pronounce God's name, and even if we did, we shouldn't because it's very special. We know it's spelled Yud-He-Vav-He, and whenever we see those four letters, we say Adonai. That really translates like my Lord. So we use Adonai all of the time, and these sockets are called Adanim, and there's something about a socket that's connecting a higher level to the lower level. That's what it was for the Mishkan. That's what the socket did. The Mishkan does something similar, making a socket between our higher selves and our lower selves, between a higher spiritual world and a material physical world, between something that we yearn for in terms of peace and then making sure that we have enough food for ourselves and for our loved ones. It's the same Hebrew letters and sounds as Adonai, the one who holds up the upper and spiritual, as well as the lower material worlds together, unified, connected. So I want to suggest to you, my friends, that the Mishkan can be our home base. The temple is the place where we can make space for God. And it doesn't have to be only the temple, but for some it's easier. And if we can be inspired here, and this is the hard one, if we can be inspired here, if we can experience a homecoming here, then we can take that inspiration and love and growth and generosity out there. That's what this is all about. Have the encounter with God, with our neighbors, with the folks behind me, the folks I never met. Feel a sense of gratitude and connectedness and go back out into the world. So I think the Mishkan is the answer. We need to build it, and we need to fill it, and we need to make it beautiful and inspiring. The Mishkan can be our home base. This is our homecoming. Now, I don't want to pretend to be something we are not. We can't be family for all. It would be nice, but also not everyone needs that when they join a synagogue, when they connect to a congregation. But we can experience a homecoming, a place of belonging, a feeling of return and renewal and revitalization, so that we can be builders and be transformed and bring that to the world. You and I can be those sockets that connect upper and lower worlds and repairing a broken world, because God's waiting. God's waiting for those repairs. Okay, friends,